Well, happy Memorial Weekend, everybody. I just wanted to jump on here and tell you a little story about why I'm a better American than you are. Well, I'm really not. That's not the truth, but I think I am, in the sense that I just have an enormous amount of respect for America. And by the way, right now I'm driving in my Tesla Model 3, and it's a 2022. I have a software version which is called 12.6.4, and the car is driving me. I am not doing anything except making this video. But anyway, that's not what this video is about. I first came to the United States. I was 17 years old. I was a child. I came from Ireland, and I arrived in a little town which happened to be the oldest city in the United States, a place called St. Augustine, Florida. And I had the great honor of doing a couple of things. Number one, when I first got here, I was a welder. I'm a mechanic. I was a mechanic as a kid, at apprenticeship. I was an apprentice mechanic in Ireland. I came here. Of course, at that time, I was an illegal alien, so my apprenticeship went out the window, but I continued in the car business, in the mechanic style business for a little while, until I transitioned into the restaurant business. But I was welding steel hulls for sailboats for my uncle and aunt in St. Augustine. And during that time, I met a man whose name was Phelps Lyons. Phelps Lyons was the gentleman who was in charge of the crawler, which is the hauler that would take the space shuttle from the hangar to the launch pad. And anyway, big long story short, I got to see the very, very first space shuttle launch from Cape Canaveral in Florida. And everything in America is big. Everything is amazing. Everything is incredible. I remember even landing in Miami. I flew to Miami, and I remember landing in Miami and looking out the window of the plane as we were landing. I saw the enormous size of the cars. I thought the cars were enormous, and I still love those old American cars. I really do. I know they were gas guzzlers, a far cry from this Tesla that I'm driving right now, but they truly are American power. They were beautiful, and they are beautiful, and I know their time has passed. But I always looked much older than my age. It was great then, sad now, but I would get into bars very easily at that age. And in Ireland we start drinking very early. I don't drink anymore, by the way, but anyway, I would start hanging around the bars, and there was a bar that opened in St. Augustine that time. It was called Brady's. And a man named John Brady owned it. He was an older, retired man. He worked for Sherwin-Williams. He was a corporate exec at Sherwin-Williams. When I met him, he was retired, and he opened this Irish pub called Brady's. And of course, I was kind of unique in St. Augustine. My aunt was there. She was Irish. There were very few Irish people there at that point. Most immigrants were going to New York and Chicago and Boston and places like that. So I was kind of a unique specimen, which ended up being a huge advantage for me. And anyway, I would hang out in Brady's, and I got to be friends with John Brady. Now, what does this have to do with Memorial Weekend? Well, John was a veteran, and he had another very good friend named Don Luce, L-U-C-E. Don was a veteran. And the American Legion at that time was in St. Augustine. It was a beautiful building, right on the waterfront. You could view the Bridge of Lions from the bar. You could sit at the bar and you could see the Bridge of Lions. Look up the Bridge of Lions. It's beautiful. And they would take me to the American Legion. Of course, you had to be a member, or you had to be signed in as a guest. I was, of course, signed in as a guest. And back then, this was 1980. Back then, there were a lot of men and women, mostly men, who had served in the Korean War. There was many World War II guys there. There was many Vietnam vets there. And that was my first experience being around the amazing human beings who make up the U.S. military. I remember, today they talk about PTSD, and there's an enormous amount of suicide today in the military. People who came back from places like Iraq and Afghanistan, Kuwait, and they take their own lives. Now, back then, you can agree or disagree with the fact that people sat around in American Legions and VFWs all day long and got drunk. That's one way to look at it, but that's not what I saw. I saw amazing men. Sometimes I would see them, and I witnessed it with John and his friends and Don. These men, you'd see them occasionally. They would be in a deep conversation with somebody there. And of course, I was the kid. I was playing the jukebox, getting drunk and trying to find a girl. And I would see these conversations with these men. And a lot of times they would be so deep. They'd be in like a huddle. They'd be huddled in a corner of the bar or in the corner at a table. And there might be one gentleman there or two gentlemen there. And, many times I saw these men cry. And they were crying in silence, but they had the ears of each other. And of course, I didn't know at the time, but this was therapy. This was their therapy. These men would sit around, and eventually they would, I guess, get enough courage after a few beers to open up. And they would tell stories. They would tell stories to their friends. And when I look back at that, I realized I was in the middle of something truly amazing. And I developed an enormous respect for America. And I still, to this day, have an enormous respect for America. And the reason I say I'm a better American than you are is, honestly, a lot of people complain about this country. And granted, many of these complaints are valid. There are a lot of people right now blaming the current president for what's going on in America as far as the price of things and the price of housing and the price of everything. And that's okay. You have the right to do that. You have the right to criticize America. You have the right to talk about America. You have many rights in America that you don't have anywhere else in the world. And yeah, do we need help on the healthcare side? Do we need help on social programs? Is our education bad? Is it too expensive? Of course it is. But we're still a work in progress, man. And for you to just constantly knock it and bash it, I don't think you're insulting the president. I don't think you're insulting the former president. I do think you're insulting many of the people who fought for it. And even they are not being taken care of properly. There is a lot of greed, there is a lot of deception, there is a lot of lies, there is a lot of corporate greed, but there's also a lot of people out there who are working really hard to make this country a better place. And frankly, when you see immigrants come here, this is one of the only places in the world that people will climb a wall. They will pay a coyote. They will starve to death to try to get across this border. And whether they're allowed to or they're not allowed to is not the point. The point is, when you land here from another country, 1980, there was nothing in Ireland. There was nothing there. There was no future for me. I couldn't go to college. Nobody was going to college back then. College came after that, en masse. Only rich people went to college. And only highly intelligent people went to college. And I've never considered myself as being highly intelligent. I can hold my own. But back then that wasn't happening. And when I landed in this country, I couldn't believe how great it was. And I still, to this day, I can't believe how great it is. And I know people struggle. I know that. And I know a lot of people struggle because they may be disabled, or they may be living in the wrong neighborhood. They may have grown up in the wrong family. But there are an awful lot of people who are struggling and complaining about their struggling, and they're not doing anything about it. there are also a lot of people who complain about struggling and they're living beyond their means. I mean, I see that constantly. I'm in conversations with friends who live in houses they shouldn't be living in, you know, who have big fancy swimming pools in their backyard that they're making payments on, and they're complaining that they don't have enough. You really do have enough. Can it be better? Of course it can. But I'm going to tell you something right now. On this Memorial Day, you know, I went to Lowe's yesterday. I had to pick something up. And I always make sure I have little flags in my front yard. And when I place those flags there, I think of John Brady, and I think of Don Luce, and I think of other people I know and other people I've met. And I think of that first space shuttle launch in Florida. And I think of the steel that was coming in to our yard down in St. Augustine. And the side of the truck said U.S. Steel. And I think of the man driving that truck. I think of all those things. Because that's what America means to me. And yeah, you can bash it. I'm sure some of you will bash me in the comments. I got to tell you something. I came here with nothing. And I have everything. And that doesn't mean that I'm a rich man by any stretch of the imagination. I do okay. But I have everything. And as long as I have the physical ability to move, I can make a living. This car I'm driving was built by another American who is a true patriot. He has done so many things that people forget about it. He provided communication during the Ukraine war. He sent convoys of Cybertrucks into Los Angeles during the fires so that they could have power to operate rescue equipment and to cook meals for people. I mean, that's just one of many things. Two of many things, I'm sorry. He continues to do so. He's a patriot. He's being labeled an enemy by the media, who brainwash people into thinking that he's a bad person. Well, he's bad to them because he's coming for them. Because you see, the lie has to stop. We are in a financially devastating period right now where we owe so much money. We are essentially a bankrupt nation. And there are a group of people who are trying to fix this, trying desperately to fix this. And will we, the citizens, experience some pain during this? You're damn right we will. But at some point, you got to pay the piper. You know, I've done okay, but there are many times I took big risks, and there are also many times that I couldn't buy the things I wanted to buy. I couldn't have the things I wanted to have. I couldn't take the vacations I wanted to. I couldn't buy the nice pair of shoes that I wanted to. I couldn't afford to buy the new car that I wanted to. That's what you have to do in order to be successful. But the one thing I always knew is that as long as I was watching what I was doing, there was always somewhere in America I could make a living, and I could make enough to survive and feed myself and put a roof over my head. Of course, you should want more than that. But on this Memorial weekend, I thank John Brady and Don Luce for introducing me to what America truly is. And America is a place where you must sacrifice, you must work hard, you must respect your neighbors, and you must have total equality. That doesn't mean handing one group of people more than you hand another group of people. I'm talking about total equality. That's the only way this country will survive. I love you, America. Thanks for watching.